when we do family analysis and we look at the 8-1, as a penta phenomena, the 8-1 is the entire expression of the penta. It is the demand within the configuration to express itself in the outside world. When you look at the 8-1 from a strictly business point of view, it's all about presentation of marketing. Nobody displays, projects, puts out depression better than an 8-1. And they will tell you how depressing their families are faster than anybody else. They'll tell you how depressing their jobs are faster than anybody else. You know, how's family life? Well, you know, it's the same old thing. You know, how's your job? Well, you know, nothing's happening, thank you. Remember about individuality that the core of individuality is about the spirit. It's the spirit. And the reason that the collective has to take responsibility for educating the individual is that we need to heal that spirit. And the spirit truly needs healing. It does. It needs healing because mutation is already taking place. I mean, if you weren't born after the discovery of Sedna, you have no potential to be involved in the mutative process that's coming. You're already on the plane, and you're never going to get off it. And that means all us humans. We're here planing out. There is no great adventure in front of us. There isn't. There isn't. What we have on this vast plain that's lying out in front of us is the opportunity to finally appreciate the process. Just the process. To appreciate the beauty of what it is to be informed, to appreciate the beauty of what the unique life can mean. But it's not about the dream of something else. Now, the whole thing we have with the 8-1 is that the 8-1 is running around, and what they are communicating the most is depression. That's what they're communicating. How boring it is to be in the workplace. How boring it is to be in the family. How boring it is to do all these boring things over and over again. How boring it is to get up every morning so that you're only going to have to go to sleep at the end of the day. How boring it is to eat when you're just going to shit it out and have to eat again, and on and on and on. Boring. You look at America, they're bored to death with cooking. You know? And then you have a society that begins to get very ill. I mean, there's this boredom. And that boredom is not from the collective. The tribe doesn't even know about boredom. Remember that. Tribal beings are not connected to the boredom principle. Even if they came close, somebody would smack them. You know, there's no boredom principle there. The collective is always, always occupied. But individuality rules. It influences us so deeply, every center, every place. 3 different aspects of circuitry. Minor circuit that changes a conformation, the format energy that is there, the integration. It's everywhere. And it's bored because nothing's happening. And the great expression of that is the 8-1, because the 8-1 does something really bizarre. I mean, at least for me. It says, we're all bored. Isn't it obvious? I mean, that's the 8-1. The not-self 8-1 is so good at that. And it, again, if you've got not-self 214 in your life, you can end up being very depressed because of them. And not because of anything they say. Just the frequency. But an 8-1 is a projected element. It recognizes that there's nothing new. It recognizes that it's all boring. And it insists on being an example for everyone else. You know, Christ on the cross. This is the 8-1. This is Christ on the cross. It's like Krishnamurti, you know? The 8-1. Christ on the cross. Okay? You know, this is the... I'm depressed for all of us. You know? Because that's really what it is. It's like, let me be your example of being depressed for everyone. Because this is what I'm really good at. Right? And I'm going to hold this all together so that I'm not going to be the outsider in this. Individuals never want to be the outsiders, eh? As much as individuals recognize they're outside, they want to be inside. So how do they get inside? We're all bored. There's nothing happening for all of us. Let's all be depressed. Now, if you think I'm being dramatic, I want you to understand that as we move closer and closer to 2027, they sell more and more downers. You know? The things that calm you down, the things that numb your creativity, the Ritalins and all the drugs that they're pounding out. The drug age, you know, this revival in my generation that brought all these drugs back. Everybody's lying back saying, okay. At least this kind of boring is kind of, well, it's relaxing. Alcoholism. It's extraordinary, the deadening that's going on. And it's all brought to you live and in color by your 8-1s. Aren't they nice people? I mean, you know, this is my apostate Abyss event. This is about turning the tables on things so that you really see them. I mean, it's nice to glorify the mutative potential of individuality and blah, 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 but you really have to see what that brings to everybody else. You have to see the negative of that. You have to see that depression is not something that resides within the individual. It's part of a chemical frequency that's in the world and is maintained by the demonstration of 8-1s as the example of direction, who in the now are depressed because nothing's happening. There's nothing new. And it's so deep. It's why on the surface you see that people are looking for things. I mean, you know, when you look at the surface consciousness, you see that everybody is sort of looking for something. And of course there is this fundamental disappointment because most of that searching, like the 1156, that the whole thing is the search, not what you find. You know, the 1156 is the mental parallel to the 2946 we looked at yesterday, where the experience is the thing. In the same way that the mental search is the thing. It's about processing a concept rather than the results. And this is everything about life. It's about just being in the life. It's not about the dream that the life somehow is going to be different. Different. This yearning in people, you know, to be better and greater and da ba 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 ba. Usually the stuff that you see that's filled up with ego. Lack of it. But you have to see the deep within us, because we are all potentially mutative. And because mutation does not simply show up because you have the potential, that there's this enormous, deep, deep chemical sadness that nothing has happened. You know, I met so many people, particularly in the late 90s, who had really gone to extremes to try to get something to happen. You know, and whether it was the guru in the East or the shaman or the techniques and the blah, 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 and they were so devastated by nothing happening. You know, they would come back and they would try to sort of find a way to try to say, yes, it was really, you know, and then you would get them the way I would get them. Where you strip away all the surface bullshit and underneath you have people that feel like they missed out. Well, all these 8-1s are the marketing agents that are telling everybody we've missed out. How sad it is. And you hear it all the time. You know, it becomes part of the mundane language of the world. How many people don't have? How many people don't get? Blah, blah, blah. I do that all the time when I'm teaching you. I'm always remembering the 3 billion that don't, and blah, blah, blah. And if you take that the wrong way, boy, is it sad. I mean, deeply. So when you're looking at the 8-1, always keep in mind that this is an instrument of enormous power to influence. And it is invariably negative. I mean, the only way that the 8-1 is ever healthy is in a penta. You know, I'm talking about not self now. I mean, at least in the penta where the individual is no longer a consistent aspect of that the 8-1 can fulfill its true purpose, which is demonstration. That is the ability to be able to demonstrate direction. So when you have somebody who is an 8-1, they are here to be the only ones recognized for direction. I mean, when you meet an 8-1, your genetic receptors, what you're taking in from this being is that this being is an example of direction. I mean, that's what it's about. They are representatives of that. Now think about the condition of that 8-1 that is not self. That 8-1 who feels like they have missed out, that nothing is really happening. This is what they market. And they don't have to tell you in words. You can hear it in their voice as they speak. Thank you. You can hear it in their voice as they speak. It's there in the tone. Everything about individuality is about acoustic. And one of the things you have to see is that the very tone that somebody carries can change your chemistry and make you feel terrible. It's amazing. You're sitting there, you're in a good mood. Somebody sits down beside you. You know, the world is really a terrible... And it doesn't matter what they're saying. They don't have to be complaining. They don't have to be saying nothing's happening. They can even be trying to be nice. And when they leave, you go into this... You know, a lot of us, because of the knowledge, we say, okay, it was their aura. You know? But it's in us. We have receptors for all of this. We are so easily depressed. We are so easily depressed by those examples. The mutative potential of individuality is invariably negative. It is. I mean, not self-mutation is just a mess. And real mutation is so rare. So you end up with the dilemma. You know, the dilemma that the sadness that permeates this planet, how easy it is for humans to indulge in sadness. This is the responsibility, direct delivery of the individual, and almost invariably expressed through the 8-1. In the very early years when I first began to go through, describing channels, I used to call the relationship between the 1 and the 8 is that the 1 would be the artist and the 8 would be the gallery owner. And you know, the gallery owner is never really taken in by the artist. It's only interested in the potential of what it can gain from its relationship. It's just one of those things. And it's up to the gallery owner whether or not the creativity is going to be displayed or not. And it's something to understand about the power of the 8th gate. I mean, the 814 is one of those incredible oppositions and chemistries. I mean, they are a unique chemistry. They're chemically connected to each other in genetics. And you can see right away what I described to you about the 14 this morning. You know, this understanding that the 14 is the power source of depression is to see that its natural chemical ally, the 8, is the expression of that depression. Only the 360 ever really looks depressed. 214s never look depressed. Other people feel depressed around them. You know, when 214s are often described as depressing rather than being depressed. And 8-1s, everyone's fooled. You know, you go to the art gallery, you figure you're going to have a cultural experience, and there's all these images of dead bodies, you know? And you walk out of there like this, you know? I mean, the 8 really does it to us, over and over and over again. The only thing that can convince the 8 that there's something worthwhile holding together is the 31 and the 33. See, what I'm trying to show you through the formats is that there's 2 fundamental processes in humanity. There's a process that is just plain, old-fashioned, sexual. You know? It is pure tribe. The whole sex course that I did, that was that world. All tribe. Everything about it. And it creates the mundane environment. And then you have what the formats show. This process of transcendence as a direction. Transcendence as a direction. But yet you can see in the way in which the column works is that what you have is you have the individuality running up the center, but in essence what you have is a woven, like the caduceus, you know, these snakes that weave around a structure. You know, old images of Kundalini and the way this spirals upward. That this very column that runs up the center, that is individuality, is wrapped in the collective. That the individuality is only in that sense the spine, but not the flesh of transcendence. And this is the pain of the individual. The pain of the individual in not being able to find transcendence through the dressing. And only wanting transcendence through the smack in the head. And feeling like it's all lost when they don't get smacked. The 8-1 stays there in the now, rigid in the now, and it says, right now, nothing is happening, nothing is happening, nothing is happening. It's instant depression. And it puts it into everyone. And the 31 says, jerk. Of course there's things happening, you idiot. Look at the patterns. Look at all the things moving through the patterns. Look at where the patterns are going. Isn't that incredible? You could follow that pattern. But right here in the now, there's nothing. Yes. Right here in the now is the beginning of a pattern. Go over here. The 33 says, fool. Look at the past. You know? Just look and see the way everything, you've got to take it all in and go through the whole experience, blah, 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 blah. And there's the 8 going, but I'm here in the now and there's nothing. Yes, but look at, you got here through something, you know. Only the collective can teach the mutative potential that never gets to realize its potential, how to live in this life. In peace. In peace. See, rave psychology is about lifting the spirit of the individual. I mean, you know, whenever I look at that image of this column, it always appears to me that it's an individual on crutches. No, I mean that. You know, really. The individual on crutches, It's got the logic crutch under this arm, and it's got the abstract crutch under this one, and it sort of works its way through. And if you try to throw away the crutches, you fall flat on your face. Right back into the depression. And again, when I say depression, doesn't mean that you've got a hound dog darkness about you. It isn't. It's about your spirit being depressed. It's about your spirit being depressed. See, the very gift of being potentially mutative carries the curse. And it carries the curse that cannot be the reason you're here, even though it's there. There has to be another reason to be here. And everywhere you look in individuality, you'll see the search for that reason. I mean, after all, we would not have any truly great development in knowledge without the 2838. We wouldn't. It wouldn't exist. Looking for that reason, looking for that purpose, willing to sacrifice their life to get to the edge just to be able to see if there is the possibility of purpose. And its purpose in the 2838, which makes it so difficult, is that it's trying to find a purpose while recognizing that it has no spirit. I mean, this is the dilemma for the individual. The dilemma for the individual is that, the very thing that you're here for, you almost never get to put into practice. So there's got to be something else. And you see, only the collective has learnt this. Because the collective has had to tend every fire that's ever been lit. I mean, that's their job, tending the fires. And every time there's a spark that comes out of mutation, the collective gathers around to tend that fire. And they're the ones that can say, look, tending the fire is incredible. Incredible. I had this wonderful experience. By the grace of the gods, I lived in a pension for about a year here on the island. A family that simply looked after me. I didn't have to pay for anything. They fed me. They were very sweet. And in the wintertime, I would tend the fire. And they had a huge fireplace. And it was wonderful because I got to burn half trees at a time. Really huge things that you could put into that fire. And I would have this delight of the magic of wood, that there would be one end of this tree in the fire and it's burning like mad and it's so hot it could sear your flesh off. And I'd have my hands at the other end outside of the fire and it would be as cool can be. And there was a magic to the process of just watching the fire, keeping the fire going. And you see, this is one of the things that is the collective's gift to the individual. The beauty of tending the fire. You don't have to be the spark. There is just the same amount of magic in tending the fire as a matter of fact, it's deeper. The spark's nothing. I know, been there. It's like an orgasm. You can't hold on. Comes, it goes, it's gone, it's over, whoosh. And then you got the rest of your life. You wake up and you say, wow, that's great, that happened, yeah, and? Stupid before, stupid after, here's the world. Same trip, Food, babies, women, children. I have many, many friends on this island who have been down the Guru Road and the Enlightenment Road and the this road and the that road. And they're so depressing to be around. And not because they are bad people, they're wonderful people, I love them. It's just nothing happened. And they think that's a failure. And it's not. It's not. But nobody came along and explained to them the beauty of tending the fire. They were all waiting to be sparks, longing to be that point of fusion. Doesn't happen. Once in a while. Once in a blue moon, as they say. It's not a commonality. It's never intended to be, because that's not the work. It isn't. It isn't. It's like when I think about collective beings who have gone through the design process. I mean, it was one of the standing jokes that, if I had not, quote unquote, met the voice, blah, 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 I never would have gone to me. I mean, I never would have paid good money as an ego manifester. I never would have understood tending the fire. I just would have gone deeper and deeper into the malaise of what it is to be a not self-ego manifester, which is not pretty. It's not. And in the same way that, without collective guidance, it wouldn't have been possible for somebody like me. Wouldn't have been possible. There would have had to have been all kinds of forces to help me find my spirit. Because my spirit was lost. When I see people who are strongly individual, it's what I always feel about them. That their spirit is, lost is a hard word. I don't really mean it in that way. I just mean that like the generators that I met in the beginning, who had never known what it was to have such a truth and a power within them. Until they could feel it, until they could sense that power. For the individual, they have no access to their spirit. They don't. They don't. And that's why they can be so uncomfortable for others. That's why they're freaks on the outside. It's not because they're freaks. It's because the collective finds them very uncomfortable. The collective says, excuse me, what are you moping around for? There's things to do. Well, I don't know about this, I can't see anything really rewarding in this life. And whether they articulate that or not, that's what's coming out of them. Now, obviously, that is a dilemma that begins with our recognition of how significant it is to be able to impact children. Children. It's the only way we can go. I mean, we can do a very nice job with the emotional system, all of these things that we've learned how to do through the knowledge. But when you're dealing with this difficulty, this dilemma of spirit, we don't have a lot of time left to figure out the techniques necessary to do this. The individual gate of spirit, the deepest gate of spirit, is under mutative pressure. The 55th gate is mutating. It means that all individuals, every individual channel, every individual gate has a certain kind of uncomfortable frequency as part of its chemistry now. Just does. I see clearly in my own process over all of these years that the more collective I become in my work, the easier it is to get the work out. And the more, it used to be when I first started readings, I used to love doing readings for freaks. It's like we're in the same union. My archetype was a guy that got wheeled in to see me who was, like a kind of Stephen Hawking's. Nothing worked. I mean, nothing worked. No hands, no leg movement, a head like this, permanent wheelchair case, brilliant mind, practically impossible for this person to articulate. And he was a 4323 projector, nothing else, a mental projector. And he's sitting in front of me. This was in Jürgen's house in Diesen. He was in the physics department, funny enough. He was a mathematical savant. And anyway, he was brought in by somebody, and guy wheels him in front of me, and I've got his design in front of me, and I looked at him and I said, you and I, we're really alike. And you could say, And I said, no, it's true. I said, we're both freaks. And it was wonderful. I mean, that was the freak union. I could go from that point of telling him that he was a freak. He had no problem understanding that he was a freak. None whatsoever. And it was very beautiful. But when he was rolled away, I had about a week where I could barely breathe. I mean, barely breathe. I was left with such a wave from this creature. This, to me, it was the embodiment of what negative mutation is all about. This incredible deadening of the spirit. And as I began to go through my process as an analyst, I began to see more and more that the individuals, rather than being like me, somebody who had the spark, so I had all this sense of fulfillment. I mean, one of the first things I said to a friend of mine who was very close to me, just after the voice, I said, oh man, I can die now. I mean, it's still true. I mean, I've been there. I got my woof. And that being, when that being was there with me, it was like, they're not like me at all. They don't have mutative joy in them. They don't have this spirit. I had an incredible spirit. I know that there's an illusion here, and I can stick my head through the sky. I have met them. I've been there. I have no problem now with spirituality, And I looked at these individuals that I was dealing with, and more, I just saw nothing but their depression and felt it in me. And I went through my process of trying to heal them. I said, well, look, melancholy is really the other side of the muse. Well, yeah. Yeah, it's true. But it was only a way I tried to heal them. Because the only way that you're really healed is that you have to surrender to what it is. I mean, what the 30th gate showed us yesterday. If you do not surrender to what life is, if you do not honor the law of the 60th gate that says, hey, everything is limitation, everything is acceptance, no guarantees of anything else, none. I'm so content that the gods were kind enough to give me a 60th gate. Because of all the lessons I've learned in my life, it's the one that's taught me the deepest lessons. It's all limited. It's all limitation. There isn't anything but limitation. Any expectation is just sheer bullshit. And not healthy bullshit. It doesn't help the spirit. It's limitation. It's acceptance. Individuals will not on their own surrender. They can't. They can't. It can happen to them. But they can never seek surrender. The collective can always seek surrender. As a matter of fact, if the collective doesn't seek surrender, we don't know how to get there. Because it is simply a transcendence program of pattern and experience. What this knowledge brings you, pattern and experience. I don't say surrender because surrender is surrender. Which is what all of the teachers throughout all of history have done. Surrender because surrender is surrender, and surrender is the thing you surrender to. And everybody goes, I'll try, No, this is all described in our work as a collective process. Surrender is the result of experiencing a pattern over time. You know, honor your authority, and over time you get to a point where you decondition and blah, 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 blah. And in fact, you do get to surrender. Magic. But it's not from the individual spark that says, I'm surrendered. Look at me. You be surrendered. Because the individual says, I don't know how to do that. Doesn't know. Doesn't know unless it happens. And it almost never happens. So they don't know. And they're deaf on top of it. And it's hard for them to hear somebody else say to them, oh, it's really easy. You just follow your strategy. Well, I don't know. No, this is really the truth. No, I haven't seen any truth in my life. You know, the guerrilla world of individuals. I'm really being hard on them today. I better have some sweet sugar or I'm going to nail them to their own cross. The 8-1. The truthful acceptance of limitation and the recognition that it can only be transcended through sharing. I mean, do you ever read these lines? I mean, it's so funny. I mean, everything that I've been describing for hours now, it's just this line, you know, this is the honesty, it says. And here you have the expression of the role model as an individual, and it says, I can't do anything without sharing. There's no transcendence without sharing, and I don't know how to share. And it doesn't. I mean, when I began to explain to people about circuitry, I always thought, when are people going to begin to say to me, there's something wrong with the language of this hexagram because it doesn't fit into the circuit's concept? It happens all the time. Otherwise, there's no way for these things to interconnect. They have to be able to meet, exchange. And when you get to the 8th gate, you see it. It's so magical. I mean, that line is so incredible. Truthful acceptance of limitation and the recognition that it can only be transcended through sharing. And it is the cry of every individual to the collective, save me. I was watching this, Karl Wojtyla, the Pope, he was a freak. Eh? And, they've been doing all of this his life and blah, blah, blah. And there was this thing, I don't know when it was, I think 3 or 4 years ago, he was getting very ill. And at some point to this crowd, he said, save me. You know, and he's an 8-1. This is what it's all about. This is the 8th gate. This is what it's saying. It's saying, look, I'm an example of individual direction without spirit. Will you please save me? And of course, today we have the nice collective day of Neptune as our savior. I particularly would not want Neptune as my savior. Don't be offended wherever you are. It's a little confusing to have a Neptunian savior, you know. I mean, you never know how you're going to be saved or whether you've even been saved. Yes, or you forget. So if we're going to heal the spirit of humanity, that it is the responsibility of the collective. There is no other way. And the more collective you are, the deeper your responsibility to heal the spirit of the individual. And it begins within yourself. I mean, we all have these things inside of us. There's so much of it. Is there anyone here in this room that doesn't have an individual gate? You know, when you look at the complexity of these 3 different variations of circuitry, Most human beings are going to have at least a gate of this, which means that within the genetic continuity of the process of the development of the spirit of the planet, that the spirit's depressed, and we know that. It's obvious. And you know, what happens now is that what we're looking at is this transition. It's been taking place since 1781, since the nine-centered process, since the ascendancy of the projector, since the change of the role of the manifester. All of this is pointed towards the need and the demand on the collective to heal the spirit of the individual, because we're about to enter into a deeply individual cycle in our evolution. We've been living with a global tribal cycle since 1610. It's been dominated by the 4037. Dominated by it. Because the precession of the equinox begins as a pinpoint in the 37th gate in Pisces. We're going to leave that behind, and it's not far away now. It's 22 years. We've got 22 years left to begin the process of knowing how to heal the spirit of the individual. And when the epoch changes, when the cycle changes, we leave behind the one thing that has protected us. This tribal, organized, communal, institutional environment where there are support mechanisms, whether it's anything from the daycare center to the bus that runs on schedule. All these mechanisms that are part of the community. And they're all going to disappear. That is not going to be the imprint in the cycle. We're going to be on our own. We're going to lose our reproductive potential. And the individual, well, it will be very difficult for them to find support. I think, and this is only my own thoughts, I'm fascinated by looking at evolutionary cycles. And one of the things that I have read a great deal about and I'm very curious about is the relationship between what we call Neanderthal and what we call Cro-Magnon. We know here in Spain that for at least 100,000 years they lived together in this part of the woods. There are many who believe they may have interconnected. Nobody knows. There are some people that think that the Basques, for example, are direct descendants of what we would call Cro-Magnon. There are those that believe that there are certain bloodlines in this part of the world that carry Neanderthal information. They lived together here for a very long time. And in the development of the human chain, in watching its chain, we know that the Neanderthal, for whatever reasons, and we do not know why, that they disappeared. There are some people who claim that they may have had language. Most don't think so. It is clear that they were intelligent enough to manage fire and certain basic tools and whatever. We're about to enter into the same phenomena again, which is why that one is interesting for me from a collective abstract perspective. What was the relationship between the two of them? What would be our relationship with another species on this planet that was human-like but not? I mean, after all, that's a rather odd thought. And it's clear that Neanderthals were alive as recently as 100,000 years ago, maybe even closer. There's some that estimate that they only disappeared 40 or 50,000 years ago. And we have another branching coming. And the reason I bring this up is, did the Neanderthals develop natural depression of their spirit to close down their mutative direction in life? I mean, as a mechanism. I mean, after all, for example, when we die, our body prepares us in many ways. It will release the right pheromones at the right time, and it will actually try to help us go through. And one of the things that it keeps on coming back to me is this image of the sad Neanderthal, and not knowing why it's sad, not understanding that its line is coming to an end, that in essence there is no value to the future. You can see that in our tribal 54 going up to the 26. You can see how the 44 is so concerned about a fear of extinction that it's the only thing within our humanness that holds on to this memory that anything can die out. Anything can die out. And to protect us against this dying out, let's say for argument that the voice is right. You know, that this whole business of rave children in 2027, I mean, I'm as anxious as you to see, like neutrinos with mass, what that's going to look like. And I'm going to do my best, because I've already established that for myself. I'm going to do my best to develop a program to train people to spot them and help them. And it's something I'm going to start in September. I'm very concerned about that. But there's something inside of me that says that what I have described to you today, remember my whole desire, if you will, with this particular seminar, is again to take you to beyond the mechanics, to begin to see these things in a totally different light. It's a new era for us. I have a feeling that the dampening of the individual spirit is actually a chemical mutation. It seems to me that the histidine, this codon, that it is clear to me that the very principles, because it so deeply impacts the 49, being both of them being histidine, that the very principles upon which the life process is based, that they are being altered. And that through that 55th gate, that there is a chemistry that is moving through humanity, that is preparing humanity for its demise. And I think that while one strain of the human context is channeling all of the creativity into the mutative potential of rave children, that the rest of that is literally shutting down the individual mutative process, shutting it down to prepare it. And when I was thinking about this, because this was all passing through my head last night, I thought, well, what do you mean spend all this energy on trying to heal a spirit that might in fact not be available for healing? And then I had this kind of goosebump feeling. Because, of course, we're going into this deeply individual era. But it's not going to be individual for rave children, which I'll demonstrate when we do global cycles. It's going to be individual for humanity. And in fact, if humanity goes into that cycle with individuality not being healed, it's clear to me that it's the end for humanity. I mean, the end, not in any dramatic, the door's going to close tomorrow, because it's not like that. And certainly none of us are going to see that. Evolution doesn't work in quick little steps. And in getting to this point, all these years later, I am surrendering to saving the collective. You know? I mean, it's clear to me Everything that I want to do now in my life is about touching the collective. That's all. Just keep on touching the collective. Transcendence for the collective is really possible. We have to do what we can to give individuality a sense of value and purpose in tending the fire. Even if the fire is going out. I mean, there's also something interesting about watching the fire go out. You know? I had a very wonderful cat. And he had leukemia. And he was dying for about a year. And on his last day, and it was very obvious he was going, I would spend an hour at a time just sitting beside him. Couldn't touch him. It was painful. He was very aware that I was there. It was a very interesting experience. And it was very beautiful just sharing with him the end of his process. And for me, it was very clear that it was something else that I was experiencing. I mean, I've experienced human death that way. There's an innocence in an animal that you don't get with a human when they go. But I could feel something else. You know, I could feel what it really means when there will be no more mutative potential. You know, it's like that point of no return where you know you can't save somebody. You know, that there is... I watched that again with the Pope. I mean, I love this kind of, archetype that they throw up in front of you for everybody to look at. You know, and 5 days before he died, there was all this prayer energy to save him. And then suddenly, it stopped. And it was all this prayer energy to send him on his way. You know? There was this shift. And it is this shift that I can feel. I don't think that individuals, in that sense, can be saved. I don't. But I do think that we can help them on their way out. I do think that we can help their spirit to see the beauty of the ride. And of course, everything about being yourself, everything about operating correctly, most human beings will never touch the concepts that we're playing with today. And they're never really going to have a chance. And the nature of, the science fiction of my description of the ending of a species and this kind of negative mutation, this kind of closing of the door. And when I taught the death course, same thing. There's this clicking of the clock. It's just clicking along. And there's a beginning and an end for everything. I mean, for everything. There is an end to our process. There's an end to our personal process. There's an end to our collective process, our tribal process. There's an end to all of this. Individuals now, and when I say individuals, please don't misunderstand me. I just mean anyone that has any kind of activation that is part of any of those gates. Each and every one of those beings, somewhere inside of them, can smell the end. And when you smell the end, there is this deep urge to ask, why then? Why bother? Why bother? Well, I used to think that there was a place to go. I always thought there was a place to go. Until I discovered that there was no place to go. There is no place to go. At the same time I hear myself describe all this to you, there's a part of me that says, I don't care. Because for me, The fact that all of these things are there and it's clearly there in the mechanics. So what? It is what it is. It's going to go the way it goes. The vast majority of humanity will not be saved. The spirit of humanity on a large scale will not be saved. I know that. I will not go up on a cross to try to make the point. There's no point. But what I do see is that for all of our searching, for all of the drive that our mutative potential have given us, that has pushed us through this whole long, long process, that the fact that this is at an end is the first time we get a chance to see what it's like to be here. In this, now. And there's nothing else. Because the only magic you're ever going to get is now, here. And the real magic is understanding something. Everything is given. It is the great grace. It's all just given. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to be. There's nothing to become. It is what it is. And this is the only philosophy that is going to save us on the road down the hill of extinction. I don't want depressed humans going to war with rave beings. My assumption is that Cro-Magnon killed Neanderthal, one way or another. Part of transforming our consciousness is that humanity as a whole, it's why again this very visible worldwide death, and the fact that they don't bury him right away, which I really appreciate, except nobody's saying, by the way, his crystal left today. He'll be back. He'll be back for sure. I can smell that. I think he's a turnaround. I think he comes back right away. Probably come back as an Arab. Well, he's deeply impressed by people who kneel all day. He is. He is. He'd love to have Christians do that. Dead popes don't dance. We individuals in the sadness of extinction can be very mean. All right. Let me shift to something even more depressing. I want to finish this right, eh? Let's take a look at integration. For all the years that I've been in design, I have people ask me, what is an archetype? It's one of the classics, the 3457. What is this archetype? An archetype of what? And I would always be very glib and say human. I'm too busy to be anything else but a human, acting like a human in the now. I'm too busy to be anything else but acting like a human in the now. See, integration, the way I always introduced it, if you're going to explain the basics of the mechanics and the ravography of this whole circuitry map, you need to begin with integration. You need to begin with integration because integration is really Cro-Magnon in that sense. Integration is the bedrock of what human was going to become. Not what human is, but what human was going to become. This archetype of intuitive behavior in the now, and the development of intuitive intelligence, strategies. I mean, after all, what we call intelligence and all of our intellectuality is simply something that was born out of strategy making. In other words, developing more and more sophisticated strategies for survival. But as we well know about integration is not available for sharing. It's not even available for empowerment. It's not a circuit. And if you look at integration today, you're looking at archaeology. Old bones. Really? Old bones. No new flesh. You want to know what it's an archetype of? It's an archetype of deep conservatism. I mean, you have to understand creatures at their very, very basic level. If you get a creature that figures out how to survive, their curiosity ends. It really does. That is the drive to develop more and more sophisticated strategies because they don't go beyond what they figure out is enough to get by with. Integration's just like that. Integration says, look, the only victory in this life is not to be afraid about tomorrow. It's the only thing. And you're only going to be afraid about tomorrow if you don't have enough in the now. You know, if you're not protected in the now, if you're not aware in the now, if you don't get it in the now. But there is absolutely nothing in integration, including the 10-20, which is the biggest con job of all, that's ready for transcendence. You see, the peripheral vision of the 20 says, what a depressing planet. It's really depressing now. And it is the integration that points out to everybody that we're just human. I mean, the archetype of expressing integration in terms of a description of humanity, you hear from me all the time. Killer monkey. This is the killer monkey. Integration is the killer monkey. And we are still the killer monkey. And the killer monkey is coming back in the next epoch. See, when you look at tribal initiation, the 2010 looks so cool. You know? The channel of awakening. Seems so wonderful. But for me, it's always been the channel of being asleep. It's always been about the channel of being asleep. It is the channel of being asleep. I mean, these are people that snore through life. And they snore through life because there's nothing else they need. They don't. They're human. They're the archetype of being human. They don't need anything else. And for them, being human is having enough in your belly and having protection in the now. And way over on the other side of the body graph, like on the other side of consciousness itself, is this deep bubbling underneath the surface of something that's not human. See, nothing's more connected to our humanness than individuality, because individuality is where the mutation came, where the mutation planed, and where the next mutation is coming. And just like Newton with Einstein, all that old stuff begins to crumble. It falls apart. It doesn't hold up anymore. See, somewhere inside of all of us is the recognition that the being human business is terminal. It's terminal. It's like taking a walk through the fourth quarter, you know? You take a walk through the fourth quarter, you see that everything is terminal. I mean, you look at those 16 gates and every one of them says, end, end. It all comes to an end, over and over and over again. That brings me to the great mutative stream. That is, it's been a mutative stream for 90,000 years now. From the 39 to the 55, from the 22 to the 12. This is where it's all happening. This is the transformation of the solar plex. This is the long-term development of enormous neural capacity in the solar plex. It's the beginning of another kind of consciousness that truly we are not equipped to grasp. We're not, because we're human. I mean, we're human. It is our limitation. You know, it's very difficult for me. It's been difficult all along to try to explain from my human perspective what this mutation really means that's coming. But I want you to see how, as humans, we cannot but be deeply impacted by the byproduct of this mutation. It's like when we had the mutation in the 12th gate. Now, the 12th is opposite the 11. And the instant that we had this mutation of the larynx through the 12th gate, so that we could begin to articulate through all the nuances of sound control, that automatically we began to have the conceptual capacity to frame the Maya into ideas and stimulate others with that and store memory with that. And that means that the 11 impacted the 56, because the 56 is the harmonic. And so the 56 began to stimulate others with the description verbally of concepts, stories. And so our first traditions, what are they? Storytelling traditions. Father to son, mother to daughter, the old traditions. And where does that 56 go? What's opposite the 56 is the 60. And you get into limitation and the cross of the laws, and it goes on and on and on until you go through the whole wheel, until you touch everything in the body. That's how mutation works. So what is the framework for this mutation? The 55 is opposite the 59. If we're going to have a mutation in the 55, we are already experiencing a mutation in the 59. What does that mean? You know, what does that mean? And if there's going to be a mutation in the 59, which means that the way in which we live out our roles sexually, that is going to be altered, stopped, taken away, blown up, cut off, who knows? And on the other side of that 59 is the 6. What change in osmosis is going to take place? Those of you that have heard me express Rave Children as a conscious penta can understand that osmosis is going to be an instrument of that consciousness. That the 6th gate, that is the source of the depth of the solar plex, that very quality of pH is going to be one of the foundations upon which Rave children are going to be able to integrate their neural field. You can take that wherever you like. And then, of course, the 6 is opposite the 36. And that means that it's going to change the way in which we experience the way. And the 36 is, goes to the 35, and it goes on and on and on. The 35 is opposite the 5, and then you get into the cross of consciousness, and you get into the flow. And that was just going the 59 out of the 55, but the 55 and the 49 belong to the same chemical family. Same chemical family. And if you change the 49, you also change the 4. Because the 4 is the opposite of the 49. And the 49 is obviously going to change the 19 because the 19's on the other side. And the 19's going to change the 33, so we got a new revelation coming. And you can just see the way the mutation is going to find its way and weave its way through everything. And it's happening now. It's why we've got this problem with the spirit. It's why you got all these people looking for the spirit. The spirit is under pressure. deep mutative pressure. And this is the only time that we are having a mutation in the solar plex, which means we don't have any collective experience of it. We don't even have something to relate to. No idea. And we can already see that that very mutation is powerful enough that in its development, remember we're talking about many, many years now, since 1781 as a marker anyway. We're talking about a long-term process, but we can already see the secondary impact of it. Not just following it this way. You know, one of the first things that I began to notice was that autism was a 1949 business. And then you begin to see the 49 and its histidine relationship with the 55 and the 49 changing to 19, and you begin to see how these things work. It's why we have such a spiritual, separate from spirit, okay? We have a spiritual dilemma. And the spiritual dilemma is that the 19 and 49, they don't really fit anymore. They're rubbing like this. I mean, it's the only way I can try to illustrate it. You know, the mutation in the 49 is going to be a mutation that is a wave mutation. I mean, we're dealing with the solar plex. The 19 has a specific way in which it pressures the 49. And it has developed this relationship over the millennia. But now you have a 49 that's changing its frequency. And remember that the 19 is the pressure for territory, God. You know, all of this tribal mystical stuff. And it's beginning to shatter. And so we get a concretized pattern of this in society. You know, where we have the rise of fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is the 19. The 19 saying, oh, are we in trouble? We better be as strong as we can right here in our pressure. And it's breaking down. So when we're looking at individuality from this perspective, there is something happening. It's really happening. I don't believe that it is going to be easy to be able to protect these beings, to find them, to save them from their parents, to find places of security for them. I mean, the greatest gift for me that has come with the voice, for my intellectual entertainment. Remember that once you're on that plane where you know that nothing's going to happen, the best that you can do is look deeply into things. Watch them. I mean, see them. See deeply into them. I like watching evolution. I mean, it's so surprising that you get to see it. I mean, we don't normally get to see it. You know, it takes place over these huge gaps of time. And with the mechanics of design, particularly cyclical mechanics and global mechanics, you can see these movements and the way they work. You know that when in 1781, Pluto was in the 41st gate. And 265 years later, we have the mutation. And as long as we have been nine-centered beings, we started with Pluto in the codon of initiation. You know, we're in this deep transforming climate, this deep Plutonian climate, this real regeneration and rebirth and resurrection. There's something new coming. And it's not us. And I think that one of the beauties that we are here to recognize as spirit is the grace to welcome what's coming. You know? Ultimately, this is the only grace that is left for humanity. Is the grace to welcome something that is greater than itself. That will be an interesting challenge. Over these 3 days, I've had a chance to talk about the transcendence process. To be able to see that our work is really about this column that runs up the center. It is the center of our work. The collective responsibility and the collective tools. You know, our job to be able to articulate the pattern clearly and to be able to express the experiential confirmation of the effectiveness of the pattern. That these are the tools for the future. This is not about mysticism anymore. It's not about magic. It's about saving as many as we can by giving them collective guidance. And I wanted to leave you with this sense that the individual aspects that we all carry, the ones that you see dominating in others, if you keep this in mind, what we have shared today, then you can begin to focus your work on them with the beauty that's in their process and not the promise of what their dreams are. You know, the dream is not something that's going to be effective anymore. There was a time when we could promise the dream, way back. We cannot promise the dream anymore. What we can offer is the beauty of reality, the beauty of the Maya, the beauty of being correct in the Maya, what it means to live a life without resistance. It does not matter for those that you teach that they ever know, or those that you give an analysis to, that they ever know that their species is coming to an end. They don't give a shit. It's not important for them. It may be interesting as sci-fi, but it doesn't matter. But I wanted you to know this. You know, it's the only reason that I teach in person anymore, is to have moments where I can talk about things at another level with those that are receptive to it. And to begin to see the larger view. And to understand the background upon which this game of ours gets played out. You know, I guess everybody saw the movie The Titanic. And there's this wonderful scene where you have these musicians, you know, and they refuse to stop playing. And there's this incredible panic and people are going to die. And there's these musicians. This is our job. We are the musicians on that ship. And the ship's going down. But we know that there's nothing we can do about the ship going down. But what we can do is bring grace to all of those that are on that ship with us. To make it worthwhile. That their process is complete for them. This is the gift of human design. That everybody has the possibility to be able to live correctly the magic of being themselves. Regardless of the larger panorama. It doesn't matter. We're not world changers. You know, like Colleen, who makes these, you know, changing the world one t-shirt at a time. Well, that's us, you know. Helping humanity one being at a time. That's our work.